The spaceport on the world called Epsilon Vega was huge, shining like glass under a strange violet sun. Ships came and went every minute, each one bringing important people for the Great Peace Meeting. It was the biggest meeting in the galaxy, where leaders from many worlds came to talk about trade and peace after years of fighting. Everyone wore bright clothes and spoke in proud voices. There was music, banners, and the hum of many languages. When the tall woman walked into the main hall, the noise softened. People turned to look at her but said nothing. She had pale skin, bright eyes, and hair that looked like silver smoke when the light touched it. Her clothes were simple, but carried some quiet grace, something that spoke of a time when she might have been powerful. Some people whispered, trying not to be heard. They said she was the queen from a fallen kingdom, the one who had once ruled fleets and lost everything. Now she walked alone, with no guards and no followers. No one offered her a seat. The long tables were filled with people from dozens of worlds, yet every seat near her stayed empty. She moved slowly as if she had grown used to this kind of silence around her. Her expression did not change, but her hands tightened when she realized there was truly nowhere she was welcome. She found a quiet corner and stood, looking out at the huge glass walls that showed the planet's horizon. Outside, the sky glowed violet and gold, and ships moved like drifting lights. She stayed there, watching the reflection of people talking and laughing behind her. It should have been a time of peace, yet the same cold distance followed her wherever she went. An older diplomat glanced her way but hurried to look elsewhere. Others whispered behind their drinks. No one wanted to be seen close to her. They feared what others might say. She was a symbol of everything the war had broken. Forgiving her, they thought, might invite more shame than peace. Then, another man entered the room. He was not a great leader or a nobleman. His uniform was plain gray, marked only by the simple sign of the Terran Federation. His name was Ethan Cole. He had served as a pilot during the long conflict, flying cargo ships and rescue missions through dangerous zones. He was used to fear, loss, and the weight of silence after battles. But even after all that, he had not forgotten kindness. He looked around the crowded hall, trying to find a place to sit. The big tables seemed full until his eyes found the empty seat beside the lonely woman in the corner. Others avoided looking at her, but he noticed the way she held herself, as if made of calm and sorrow at once. Ethan did not think long about it. He walked over, sat down quietly beside her, and poured himself a drink from the jug on the table. Conversations nearby paused. Some people stared in open surprise. A few whispered his name, as if he had just made a huge mistake. The woman turned her head slightly. For a moment she said nothing. Then she asked softly, "Do you know who I am?" Ethan took a sip and nodded. "I know enough," he answered. "I also know that no one should have to sit alone." She watched him for a few seconds, uncertain if he was mocking her, but there was no mockery in his eyes. There was only calm honesty. The sound of nearby talk slowly returned, though it came with sneaky glances in their direction. "I did not expect anyone to come this close," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Guess I'm too tired to care what the others think. There's enough space in this room for 2 people to share a table." The faintest curve touched her lips. It was not quite a smile, more like surprise breaking through her guarded shell. For the first time since she entered the hall, her posture softened. The silence between them became lighter. Ethan pointed at the window and said, "The sky here looks strange, doesn't it? Like it can't decide between night and morning." "It reminds me of home," she said. "It used to look like that after storms." Ethan nodded. "Maybe the world still remembers you then." The words hit her in a quiet way. She looked back at the violet horizon and said no more. But something inside her began to ease, as if a wall had been cracked open by a simple act of kindness. Around the room, the other guests continued to talk and pretend not to stare. But the sight remained clear in everyone's mind, one man choosing to sit where no one else dared. It was a small moment, simple and quiet. Yet in that moment, something began to change. Not just in the room, but in the story that was about to unfold across every world that dreamed of peace. The next morning came with soft gold light slipping through the high windows of the conference hall. The Great Peace Meeting was set to begin, and the air was full of expectation. But even before it started, people still whispered about what had happened the night before. Everyone had seen the man from Earth, Ethan Cole, sit beside the woman nobody else dared to approach. Some called him brave, Others called him foolish. A few said he only wanted attention, but Ethan did not seem to care. He had come to the meeting to listen and to help build peace, not to play politics. So when he walked back into the hall and saw the same woman standing alone again, he walked right up to her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The woman was looking out at the gardens beyond the glass wall. The gardens were quiet and full of silver trees that caught the light of the violet sun. For a moment she did not notice Ethan beside her, and hearing his steps, she turned and gave a small nod. "You came back," she said in a calm, even voice. "Well, there was still coffee left," Ethan said with a faint smile. "Can't waste good coffee." That made her blink slowly, then look down as if trying not to smile. She seemed unsure how to handle someone who spoke to her like a normal person. "I am not sure you should be seen talking to me," she said. "Many people do not forgive easily. I'm not here to please them," Ethan said simply. "Besides, it's easier to start peace if anyone, actually talks." There was a pause. The woman watched him, her eyes full of questions she did not know how to ask. At last she said, "My name is Lyra." Ethan nodded. "I figured you had one. Nice to meet you, Lyra." He said her name as if it were completely ordinary. He did not bow or stutter or treat her like a legend. That normal tone felt almost magical to her. For years, she had only been called the queen, the prisoner, or the enemy. Hearing her name spoken kindly was strange, almost unreal. They walked side by side through the garden paths after the first session of the meeting. Diplomats, soldiers, and advisors watched them, whispering among themselves. Some frowned, others seemed curious. But Ethan and Lyra walked as if the world had grown quiet for just them. Ethan told her about his home on Earth. He spoke of green forests, rain that smelled like salt and dust, and oceans that stretched forever. Listened carefully, her eyes softening. She had never seen oceans before, only hollow metal seas of warships and steel cities built under red suns. Ethan's stories felt like windows opening into a distant dream. Then she told him a story too. She spoke of her home before the wars, when she had ruled people who sang to the winds in mountain cities, when light towers brightened whole valleys, when children learned the old songs of joy. "We thought we were bringing order to the stars," she said, "but we brought fire instead." Ethan did not try to comfort her with empty words. He just nodded and listened. "You know," he said, "on Earth, there's a saying my father liked. He said that no storm lasts forever. Maybe peace is just waiting for people who are tired of thunder." Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining faintly. "You believe the storm will end?" "I have to," Ethan said. "Otherwise, all the flying, all the fighting, all the losses, what were they for?" They reached a stone bench near a fountain and sat down. Water shimmered in slow motion, bending light like glass. Ethan looked at her hands, noticing the small scars crossing her fingers. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" Lyra nodded once. "More than I wanted to. Sometimes I wonder if forgiveness is even possible." "It has to be," Ethan said softly. "Peace doesn't start with everyone agreeing. It starts with someone taking the first seat." Lyra looked away, pretending to study the water, but her heartbeat quickened. No one had ever spoken to her with such quiet confidence. She had faced generals, judges, and politicians, but not one of them had given her this kind of humanity. When they returned to the hall later that day, a few others dared to greet her. One young delegate from Mars nodded. Another even asked a short question about her old homeworld. The change was small but real. It had begun because one ordinary man had sat beside her without fear. By the end of the day, Lyra found herself smiling again. Not out of duty, but from something warmer, something almost forgotten. It was hope. And somewhere deep in the grand hall filled with laughter and suspicion, the same people who once avoided her began to wonder if maybe the human named Ethan Cole knew something they did not, that peace could start not with speeches or treaties, but with the simple courage to share a seat and a quiet conversation. The peace meeting entered its third day, and the great hall buzzed with arguments, promises, and the sound of translators repeating endless speeches. Outside the windows, the violet sun was bright and proud, but inside the meeting, tension hung like smoke. People smiled in public and whispered sharp words behind closed doors. In the middle of it all, Ethan and Lyra had started to draw quiet attention. People watched them while pretending not to. Ethan would walk beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and she would listen to him in a way she had never listened to anyone before. When he spoke, her face softened, and when she replied, her words carried a calm that slowly touched those around them. Even the guards, who once turned their backs, began to nod politely as she passed. A few officials, out of curiosity more than courage, tried to talk to her about small matters. Lyra, graceful and measured, answered with dignity. It was not so much what she said, but how she said it, clear, controlled, and honest. It made people wonder whether the stories about her cruelty were only echoes from an old war. That tiny spark of change was noticed by others who did not welcome it. In dark corners and secret halls, men and women who profited from fear whispered together. There were traders of weapons, reporters hungry for scandal, and even diplomats who built their power on division. To them, peace was dangerous. One of them, a man named Carter Vaughn, watched Ethan and Lyra from across the main hall during lunch. He had been part of the war once too, but unlike Ethan, he had loved it. War had made him rich. The thought of a new peace that could unite humans and others under a single idea filled him with bitter anger. "They are making people forget," he muttered to the man beside him. "That woman destroyed half the colonies. Now look at her sitting there like she belongs." The other man shrugged nervously. "It's only talk, Carter. Let them talk." Carter smiled thinly. "Talk becomes sympathy. Sympathy becomes forgiveness. And forgiveness kills the need for soldiers like us." Across the room, Lyra was speaking quietly with Ethan. "I can feel their eyes again," she said without turning to look. Ethan nodded. "Let them watch. They'll get used to it." "You think they will?" "I think people are stubborn. But sometimes, when they see something good, they want to believe in it, even if they're scared of it." Lyra took a long breath. "You are strange, Ethan Cole," he laughed softly. "So I've been told." Their friendship had grown in subtle ways. They would eat together, talk late into the night, and sometimes walk in the gardens without saying a word. Silence between them was never heavy. It felt natural, even peaceful. Ethan's plain human kindness had done what no treaty couldn't, made Lyra less alone. But whispers kept rising like dust. Some said Ethan was being used. Others said Lyra was pretending to change just to earn sympathy. A few reporters began spreading rumors that the two of them were secretly planning to influence the conference. Traps were being set quietly, not with weapons, but with words. That evening, Ethan returned to his small room in the East Tower. When he opened the door, he found a message pad waiting on his desk. The handwriting on it was neat and unfamiliar. It read, "You are sitting beside danger. Walk away before it is too late." He stared at the message for a long moment, then put it aside. He had faced worse threats in the war. Fear did not interest him. The next morning, as he entered the hall, Lyra was already there. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed by worry. "You should not be seen with me today," she said quietly. "The others have begun to speak again. They'll say terrible things." "I've been called worse," Ethan said lightly, as he took his usual seat beside her. Lyra frowned, almost frustrated by his ease. "You do not understand. My past cannot be washed away by polite words." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Maybe not. But your future can start with them." His steady tone made her pause. Something inside her wanted to argue, to insist that he was being foolish, but another part of her wanted to believe him. Around them, the noise of the meeting began again. Delegates shouted, translators spoke, and chaos returned. Yet at that lonely table near the window, peace sat quietly between two people who refused to give up on it. Carter Vaughn, watching from the far end, narrowed his eyes. He saw in them a danger greater than guns or fleets. He saw hope beginning to grow, and it frightened him more than any battle ever had. That night, under the soft glow of the twin moons, while most of the hall slept, Carter left his room and walked down to the lower levels of the complex. There, in the shadows, he met with two others. Their voices were low, their plans cold and simple. "The summit cannot end with her name spoken in peace," Carter said. "We cannot let her make them believe." And while they plotted, high above them in the quiet of the gardens, Ethan and Lyra looked up at the stars. They did not speak. They simply shared a silence that held something rare and bright. Neither of them knew that another storm was already gathering. But but for that small moment, they allowed themselves to believe that peace was finally within reach. The morning began calm, almost to calm. Sky above Epsilon Vega glowed in shades of violet and gold, and the gardens outside the great hall looked peaceful. Birds shaped like ribbons floated through the air, and a weak wind carried the smell of metal and new flowers. It should have been a good day for the final talks of the Great Peace Meeting, yet something about the quiet felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Lyra walked into the main hall earlier than usual. She had slept little. Her mind kept circling around the strange tension from the night before. People's smiles had looked thinner. Their laughter had sounded forced. She knew something was changing, but she did not know what. When she saw Ethan walk through the door, some of the pressure in her chest lifted. He smiled the same calm smile that she had come to trust. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "I didn't," she answered. "I had bad dreams." "About the past? About tomorrow?" Ethan frowned, but said nothing. He could feel the same strange mood in the air. Some of the faces around the hall seemed too serious, too guarded. A few people turned when they saw Lyra and whispered to one another. Ethan's soldier instincts woke up again. Something was wrong. Sat together as always, at their table near the wide window. The peace meeting began with long speeches about a new beginning, about lessons from war, about hope and cooperation. But while the voices rose, Ethan noticed small things that others missed. One guard near the back kept watching the exits instead of the crowd. A technician near the stage looked nervous, sweating even though the room was cool. Ethan leaned closer to Lyra. His voice was low. "Something feels off. Did you notice?" She nodded slightly. "Yes. They are too careful today." While the chairman walked to the stage to announce the final vote, faint humming sound came from somewhere below the floor. It was so soft that only a few people near the walls could hear it. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had heard that sound before years ago on transport ships that carried explosives for defense fleets. He whispered, "Stay here," and stood up. Lyra reached for his arm. "Ethan, what is it?" "I hope it's nothing," he said. "But if it's something, don't move." He walked around the table and crouched near the floor panel close to the main platform. Sound was clearer, now a steady, mechanical hum. He pulled a small tool from his belt and pried open the panel. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Wires red and silver ran in a pattern that could only mean one thing: bomb. He straightened, trying not to draw attention, but Lyra saw the look on his face. Without waiting, she joined him. Her calm eyes scanned the panel. "We have very little time," she said. Ethan frowned. "Do you know how to handle it?" "Yes. I built something like this long ago. When the war was young, her voice was neither proud nor ashamed, only steady. "Then let's stop it before anyone gets hurt," Ethan said. They dropped to their knees together. The hum grew louder as they worked in silence. Lyra directed him with quick, firm words. "Cut that wire." "No, the other one. Keep your hand steady." Sweat ran down Ethan's neck, but he followed her instructions without hesitation. Her movements were fast, sure, almost graceful. Around them, people slowly began to notice what was happening. The chairman stumbled over his speech. Cards shouted for everyone to stay back. The noise filled the hall, but Ethan and Lyra barely heard it. Finally, Lyra looked up from the panel. "There's one more wire," she said. "If I cut it wrong, the charge will go off. But if I don't cut it, it will go off anyway." Ethan looked at her calmly. "Then you can't be wrong." She smiled faintly, though her eyes were sad. "You always make things sound easy." She took a breath, studied the wires, and cut. For a second, the humming stopped. Then there was only silence. The screens flickered and went dark. People gasped, then slowly realized the danger had passed. The bomb was dead. Lyra sat back, shaking slightly. Ethan exhaled a long breath and laughed out of relief. "You did it?" he said. "No," she said softly. "We did." Security teams rushed in, sealing the exits. Reporters shouted questions. But in the center of the rush, Ethan helped her to her feet. The two of them stood side by side, their clothes streaked with dust. Everyone looked at them now, not with suspicion, but with awe. One person had feared her. One had tried to destroy her, yet she had saved all of them. Later that night, when the hall was calm again, Ethan and Lyra sat outside under the stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the silver trees. Ethan looked at her hand, which was burned from the heat of the bomb's wires. "You didn't have to help," he said quietly. "You could have walked away." Lyra looked at the stars. "Maybe once I would have, but not anymore. Some things are worth staying for." They sat together until dawn, silent but not alone. The first light touched the edge of the glass towers, and for the first time, the new day felt safe. The sun of Epsilon Vega rose high and clean, shining across the long glass roofs of the great hall where the peace meeting had almost ended in disaster. Workers were still fixing the floor where Ethan and Lyra had disarmed the bomb the day before. Pieces of wire and broken panels had been cleared away, but the marks remained, black against the silver floor. News of what had happened spread fast across every world. The story was everywhere. The woman who had once been feared had saved the lives of everyone at the meeting. Images of her holding the burned wires with her bare hands filled every screen. People spoke her name again, but now they said it with respect. Inside the hall, many of the delegates stood together, speaking in low voices. Some of them looked ashamed. Some looked hopeful. Ethan and Lyra sat quietly at their usual table by the window. For the first time, no one avoided them. A few came forward to thank her. Others just nodded and smiled, awkward but sincere. Lyra still looked tired. The burn on her hand was bandaged, and her eyes carried the shadow of the night before. Ethan noticed she hadn't eaten anything. "You need food," he said gently. She shook her head. "I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all day. And no queen of yours is going to faint in front of all these diplomats." That earned a small laugh from her. It was only a short sound, but it was real. "Very well," she said. "You always win these small fights." "That's because I picked the right ones," Ethan said with a grin. They shared a quiet breakfast. Beyond them, people started taking their seats for the final session. The old chairman, who had nearly lost his life yesterday, stood at the center of the stage, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "My friends," he said, "we have seen bravery that no words can match. We were ready to judge one person for her past, but she has shown us the meaning of peace better than all our speeches." Every pair of eyes turned toward Lyra. She wanted to stand and protest, to remind them that she had made many wrong choices, but Ethan gave her a look that said, "Let them speak." The chairman continued, "Peace is not born from fear or rules or power. It begins when one person chooses to take a seat beside another, not to fight, but to understand. Yesterday, that small act of kindness saved us all." Silence spread through the hall. Then slowly, people began to stand and clap. Lyra's face turned faintly red, but she did not look away. For the first time in years, she accepted their eyes on her without shame. When the applause ended, the chairman announced that a new table would be built at the center of the hall, one that would remind them all of this day. It would be made from the metal of ships that had once fought on opposite sides, a symbol of forgiveness turned solid. He then asked that Lyra take the first seat at that table. She hesitated for a moment. Then she stood, straight and calm. Her walk toward the center of the hall felt like a lifetime compressed into a few steps. When she sat down, the hall fell completely silent. Every other delegate slowly followed, taking their own seats until the hall was full again. Ethan watched from the side as the light from the ceiling caught in Lyra's hair. Pride and warmth spread through him. He had seen many things break during his life wars, ships' hopes, but now, for once, he was seeing something being built. After the session ended, people surrounded Lyra, asking questions, offering help, even smiling. The same people who had refused to sit near her were now grateful to stand beside her. Ethan stayed back, letting her have the moment she had earned. When the crowd finally thinned, she walked toward him. "It seems I have become a symbol," she said softly. "You were one before," Ethan said. "It's time it's just for something good." She looked up at the golden sky through the open glass roof. "Do you think it will last, Ethan? This peace?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe not forever, but long enough for someone else to see what we saw. That will be enough." They left the hall together, walking through the garden where they had once stood when no one dared come close. The silver trees moved gently in the wind, their leaves whispering like low voices. Lyra touched one of the trunks and smiled. "It is strange," she said. "When I came here, I felt like the last shadow of an old world. Now I feel like the first piece of a new one." Ethan smiled. "That's what peace does. It starts with one choice. one table, one seat. They reached the edge of the garden, where the landing field stretched out under the bright sky. Ships were taking off one by one, heading home to distant worlds. Lyra stopped and turned toward him. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For sitting beside me when no one else would." Ethan shrugged lightly. "You made it worth the seat." She laughed softly, a sound full of life. Then she turned and walked toward her shuttle, her steps confident and free. Ethan watched her go until her figure blended with the white glow of the sky. When her ship lifted into the air and disappeared among the clouds, he stayed for a while, watching the trails in the sky fade. Around him, workers and delegates hurried to their own ships, filled with plans and new hope. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt sure that peace was not just a word for dreamers. It was real, built from small acts, quiet courage, and the simple decision of one human who had chosen to sit beside another when the world had turned away.